Hello and welcome to our CIMA P3 Performance Strategy lecture recap for Lecture 3, Control Systems. First things first then, systems. A business is a system with a series of subsystems. It's an open system, which means that it's open to its environment, it interacts with its environment. There are various other systems to classify, the first of which being a deterministic system. Now, it's very predictable, like a machine does the same thing over and over and over. Probabilistic systems, now they're similar in that they're predictable, but they won't do the same thing, it'll depend on the inputs. Cybernetic systems are systems that can learn, and thermostatic systems are automated and react at a particular point. For example, an engine turning itself off when it overheats. So, controlling a system then. First thing I want to look at here is feedback control. Now this is the difference between what is achieved and what is planned. So you're looking at your actual achievements and comparing them to the plan that you had before you started. A feedback loop then will involve a process which firstly measures the outputs, then reports the outputs, and then takes action if it's required to be taken. An open feedback loop will involve management deciding the action. A closed feedback loop is when the action is predetermined, management don't have any input. Okay, a couple of types of feedback. Primary feedback will go to the line manager, but sometimes if there's a large variance you may get secondary feedback, and this goes straight to senior management. You may get negative feedback, in which case you might want to amend the system, or you may get positive feedback. Now you may try to reinforce this positive feedback, because if it's working for you, you might want to make it even better. As opposed to feedback control, we then have feed-forward control. Feed-forward control involves preparing forecasts, comparing it to the plan that you have, and then anticipating any deviations. So if the forecasts you have don't compare favourably to the plan, then you can anticipate the deviations and do something about them before the action is taken. Okay, so that's a little bit about systems. We then need to look at the best structure of a control system, or things that we need to consider when we're looking at a control system to make it effective. So what we've got to consider, firstly we consider the organisational structure. You'll know from your previous studies that you can have a functional structure, a divisional structure, a matrix structure which combines those two, or a network which involve things such as a strategic alliance. You'll also have to consider the responsibility accounting within the organisation. Does it operate cost centres, revenue centres, profit centres, or investment centres? All of these will have to be considered when designing an effective system. You'll also have to consider the performance measurement. A couple of different ones we looked at were return on investment. Two ways to calculate it, the first being profit after depreciation over net assets employed, i.e. the assets less the depreciation. Problem with that being that even if your profit stays the same, as your assets become depreciated, the ROI will increase. Second method then, profit after depreciation over gross assets employed, trying to eliminate that problem. However, this method doesn't allow for new assets as opposed to old assets, which may be more or less efficient. Another method was residual income, and it's accounting profit less the notional interest, i.e. the notional interest is your cost of capital, and we looked at an example of that in the notes. Economic value added then, it's net operating profit after tax less the capital charge. Again, this tries to subtract your cost of capital to see what economic value is actually added by your activities. We then went on to look at some accounting systems. We discussed the problems with traditional systems, that all costs were allocated as production costs, that there was a lack of strategic thinking, that reporting was too slow, and there were questions about budgeting, such as, is it a constraint on innovation, and does it encourage slack in the system? Modern accounting systems then try to deal with these problems by being flexible, by getting things right first time, by concentrating on quality, and by trying to differentiate. So let's look more closely at the modern methods. Firstly, in manufacturing. Well, in manufacturing now you want to highlight flexible production. You want to have demand-led production, i.e. don't produce unless the goods are demanded. You want to focus on quality, and you really want to understand your costs, maybe through a system such as activity-based costing. You may implement a just-in-time system. It's a pull system, which is demand-led. It leads to low or no inventory. However, you have heavy reliance on your suppliers. Now what this focuses on is throughput, and may use throughput accounting, which we'll look at later. And really, you want to have a flexible process if you're going to implement a just-in-time system. This is related to total quality management. Characteristics of this are that firstly there should be a customer focus. There shouldn't be any substandard materials, which means that no inspection is required. You get it right first time, leads to no inspections. The employees have to take responsibility for a TQM system. Everyone is responsible for quality. You need to focus on zero defects. You may implement quality certification, and you focus on the cost of poor quality and eliminating those costs. Okay, so those are some modern methods. Performance then, using these modern methods. First of all, as we said, we have financial performance. The throughput accounting that we talked about under just-in-time. It operates in that just-in-time environment. It operates around the theory of constraints. You want to maximize the throughput, so you focus on what's constraining production in your process. And it calculates your throughput contribution, which is your sales less direct materials. Now you'll have done extensive work on this in previous modules, so we don't need to go through the calculations at the minute. Also, backflush accounting. This is where we work backwards to flush out the costs. So it's in a system where there's no work in progress. You'll get to the end and work backwards, and you'll flush out the costs. Non-financial performance, well, that'll be the balance scorecard, which you'll have met in previous studies. It focuses on firstly the customer. What do the customer want? Secondly, internal focus. What are we doing well? What are we doing badly? Innovation and learning. How do we continuously improve? And financial aspects, using those measures that we looked at before to assess the financial performance of the business. And that is our introduction to control systems.